Welcome to the Kaizen Podcast, Naftali. Very nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. Would you like to introduce yourself really fast, just so we could get to know you a little bit more?
Well, my name is Naftali Moses.
Nice.
I work as a professional transformational coach in Los Angeles, and I'm exceptionally happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
No, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Let's start with what circumstance in your life led you to become who you are now, and if there's anything that you'd like to highlight about that is going to be brought to this podcast.
All right, wonderful. Well, great question. I mean, exceptional parents, we'll start there. And I have to say that being able to recognize that you need to take 100% responsibility for your life. And I was given an opportunity to do that when my parents took me out of school at a young age. I was inherently raised Orthodox Jewish, and they kind of saw that there was a manipulation of the religious text and the doctrines, and it wasn't God-based. And then that made me just chill at home, right? And I just got to see my parents argue all the time. But they weren't vicious. They were fighting over the fact that they wanted the best for their family and the best for each other, because that's initially what they believed. And you know, I was 12, my twin brother was 12. We'd climb a tree, read Harry Potter, just fuck around. And then I would say that over this arcing period of life, I recognized that there are the people that want to take responsibility for their life and those that don't. And of course, it made sense on a religious aspect and a familial aspect. And I'd say one of the biggest life-changing moments I had was in a relationship. In that relationship, I was 20 years old, and I guess the only thing that I knew for certain was how lonely I was and how much I wanted to change that. So without any understanding of who I was at the time, I just utilized all of my capacity to get somebody who was the perfect sheet of paper to be all the things that I wanted them to be. And of course, a year and a half of that relationship, being able to not only recognize and see how much I was a culprit for that, but I believe that was the first time in my life where I felt like the switch turned on and I had my own thoughts. And it was when I was able to understand the responsibility of what it means to be conscious and all of that and what it entailed for me. And so once I stepped into that, it was like I could smell, I could feel, I could think. And I remember just looking at her. It was one of the last arguments we were having. And it's typically what happens when your relationship starts to suck. You have two choices. You can keep going on the emotional roller coaster and tell yourself one day it'll change. Or you could look it in the eye and you could recognize that it's not giving you anything that you want or need, and that perhaps this is your fault. And so I remember just looking her in the eye. I was right by the door, and there was like a moment in time where I felt consciousness for the first time. I can't even describe it because everything was unconscious for such a long period of my life. It was just cause and effect. I'm gonna stop
you right there. Was there something that happened that led to that awakening in consciousness, or was it just you woke up that one day randomly?
I was abandoning my values in the relationship. Somebody who's very traditional, very religious, very, very forward. And I would start rationalizing all of these things that were happening in the relationship like as if they were okay when they really weren't. That's actually not how I wanted my life to be. So this particular moment did lead to the start of that, quote, individuation process or transformational process. So once I recognized that there is a thing called consciousness and you are constantly being spoken to and that there's information happening on every level, and perhaps you don't need to pick up every self-help book to feel like you know something, but you need to be open with that there is more. And that was probably the most life-changing moment in my life, because that was the moment I realized there's so much more for me to be found here. And I believe that for everybody, that there's so much more for them to find there. And it's for those that want to find the truth about themselves. Because I looked at my life, not thinking that there's wrong with any Christmas trees, but as a Jew, we keep Hanukkah. I had a Christmas tree in my house. I had a bunch of decorations on. I owned a fucking rabbit. My girlfriend was converting because she had to. And I was like, whoa, this is not it. Like, there's more to this. There's more to this. There needs to be something that I don't have to immediately resort to manipulation in order to find love. And then when I said, this relationship is over, don't reach out to me on anything. I'm gonna block you. I'm gonna be out of my own house in the next 10 minutes.
Wow.
And that's actually when my life started, because everything up to that point was just gathering intel about how much of a psychopath I was and how much of that I needed to genuinely own up to and start integrating into my day-to-day. And that's when I felt all the stress. It's when I felt all the pain, but that's when I felt all the life. And I could see how much responsibility we really have, especially for those who want to give more.
That's awesome, because that is exactly what we want to be talking about right here, right now. And basically the objective of even this whole conversation is to go into what actually is a healthy relationship, because most people are not like you in the sense that they see everything that you saw within that relationship. And I believe they they get so freaked out, and instead of looking in the mirror and kind of saying like, oh wow,
I should be accountable. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, they run away from that responsibility, which is the opposite of what you did. And as kind of what I'm hearing, that's what led you to become who you are today. And you become somebody that is able to distinguish both masculine and feminine energies and their subsets of like toxic, mature, and immature. So yeah, that was a lot. Thanks for sharing. But I wanted to ask you, in that moment when you made that decision, how did you overcome the fear of the unknown? Or what led up to that? Like that point where you said, I can't take this anymore. I need to look at myself in the mirror. And what do you think would have been the consequences of not following your intuition in that point of time, and rather succumbing to the fear?
Well, you need to be raised to understand that there is an inner voice, right? So that there is something bigger. And the only reason to ever step out of anything is because there's a system of values that you hold yourself to that demand more from you.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't have that, well, then I would have just looked around and been like, oh, well, there's shit everywhere. Let me just stay here. This is less shit.
Yes.
And let me just play the most power cards that I can. And then what you get is a repressed woman who will cut your dick off in the middle of the night, which is not what you want, metaphorically speaking. I mean, it does happen, but we're talking about the dangers of having something that's not mutual, that's not aligned, that's not you, and it's not mirrored in them, because this is a collective experience for a man and a woman to come together, that you will be sculpting one another and loving every moment by which you do that for each other. So it's not like, oh, what are you doing? It's, oh, thank God you did that, because that's what I wanted and I couldn't reach it, and you're there and you're the person I trust with me.
Exactly.
More than I do. And then that takes courage.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of safety, especially for women. And the feminine energy, I don't think, can even exist without the masculine first being there to lay the grounds of safety, so that then feminine can become something other than the toxic femininity that is like very manipulative and very, pulling strings to get the man to do what she wants him to do. So, okay, well then...
tell me a little bit about yourself and how I know you've went into psychology. This has been something that's clearly interested you. What shaped your mind around saying there's a problem here?
Yeah.
Because I could see this in my life clearly, and I want to fix this. I definitely want to fix it for others because I fixed it in myself. So how did that start for you?
For me, I think it goes back to like really seeing that people that even have the best intentions don't necessarily know how to live their life correctly. And I'm mostly speaking about my parents. I saw how much my parents tried to be good people and good parents, but because they didn't know themselves well enough, they were unable to actually educate me or even teach me how to communicate in the correct way to set me up for success. In a way, yes. Yeah.
Kind of like, you don't do this, but then smoke the cigarette as I tell you not to smoke.
Not exactly that, but it was mostly in regards to religion. And I think that's why I also started questioning.
Maybe we should talk about religion.
Maybe we should talk about okay. Yeah, maybe. But I've always been somebody that likes to question everything. Especially if it's not giving the correct outcomes, or not the correct outcomes, but the consequences are showing that it's clearly not working. Something's not working. And it goes back to what you were saying about the fruit. And I think when everything kind of changed for me was when I realized that my parents didn't exactly have a healthy relationship. Even if they were together and, they went to church and they had similar values even, or they said that they did have similar values, I didn't think that that was a healthy relationship. And it really scared me when I really started to think about how I've never actually seen a healthy relationship. I don't think I even, at this point in time, know of anybody that has an actual healthy romantic relationship.
That's fascinating you mentioned that. Yeah, so yeah. I could say this from my experience. I've seen a healthy relationship.
Who?
My parents.
Wow.
I've seen it.
You're very lucky.
I'm not just lucky, I'm extraordinarily blessed.
Yeah.
But I'm blessed with purpose, and I understand that I'm blessed with purpose. I'm not just here because life can be enjoyed even with trauma. It's not because you have better things that you enjoy life. it's not the classic story where I was like, I saw my parents try to kill each other every morning and I realized I could have more. No, I've actually saw what love was and I had no excuse.
Yeah, you have no excuse.
I was still a piece of shit, even with real love. And so that made me realize that you need to show up for yourself 100% unconditionally to achieve that kind of unconditional space in a relationship. When I say unconditional, I mean with conditions, don't weaponize them. But it just means it's an agreed condition that is effortless for both parties to give to.
Exactly.
Then it becomes an unconditional space.
Unconditional space instead of unconditional love.
There is an alternative. And I think a lot of people don't know that there is an alternative. And that's why there's so much settling for less. Is you look around and about and you go, well, this sucks, this guy sucks, this guy has a problem, this guy has a problem, this guy has a problem, this girl has a problem, this girl has a problem. Opposed to maybe there's people who are actually working towards something collectively as a couple and the problem isn't each other, but it's the war out there.
Yeah, and exactly. And that's why even through this conversation, my goal would be to kind of explain to other people what would a actually healthy relationship look like. And it seems like you already know. So
yeah, well, I'm trying my best too. It's one step self-awareness, the other step accountability, and I think the third step an understanding of who you are. Right, I think that kind of goes in the first one, self-awareness.
Yeah. Okay, well then if we could start there, and basically it all leads back to, you becoming responsible of who you are, but then at the same time, you becoming the person that is able to choose somebody that is able to provide safety within the relationship, because it doesn't matter if you're like, you know yourself, but you don't know what you want out of a relationship even. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If there's two things that people can do for themselves is understand what you want and what you need from others and make that a moral obligation. Because if you don't, then you're implying that you don't have a dark nature and that you won't pull those needs from somebody who's not willing to give them. So you have to accept what you want. It might feel like you're too much, and this is particularly for women. When they feel too feminine, there's backlashes. And for men, if you're masculine, you need a woman. And that lack of vulnerability on both parties creates the toxicity, right? Because that's how you can get power. And people only know how to function when they have insecurities, when they feel power. So the first step is inherently clearing the insecurities around what you are and what you need.
Is this within a relationship or outside of a relationship?
First relationship here, and then the relationship you build with others is easy mode. It's actually easy mode. Because you understand what questions to ask yourself, and of course what questions to ask the other person. And if I know what I need in my life, and I communicate that to you, and I'm connected to it, perhaps that's what you're waiting for, is that invitation. So the hardest thing for a lot of women to do, I've noticed particularly, even for men to do, is to ask for what they want and need, because they feel it's too much. Or that they're too sensitive, or that they're too needy, or that they're too clingy.
Okay.
When truth be told, there's a relationship with all of those parts of yourself because you have them. If you feel that you are, you probably are. But why can't you ask for the reassurance, the security, and the safety that you need in your relationships without feeling like you can have it? And then that leads to the second part. Are you enough? Yeah,
that really is the question that ties everything together. And I think it's a question that everybody's fears usually ends up there.
There's so much to what a healthy relationship looks like, is that you have two people that know who they are and what they want.
Yes.
There's something that is being distorted now, that it's a fucking philosophical question of what is a woman. It's ridiculous. It's also a philosophical question as to what men are. You can't quantify it. You go on the street, what's a man? What's a man? Oh, McLaren, hair transplant, 30, like, or muscles. Do you understand that? Like, if you look on YouTube, the quantification of masculinity is low lighting and a bodybuilding shot or a bodybuilding pose with Metamorphosis playing in the background. It's nonsense. And people are gravitating towards inherently this feeling of power, because what do people associate masculinity to? To power, right? Yes. Masculinity has power in it, so that means masculinity is bigger than power itself, so don't attach yourself to power. And then inherently the same thing goes for women, which is like, okay, I don't want to be undervalued, I want to be respected, which already shows you probably have some self-worth issues. If you're going to go out in the world and stomp around in your heels saying, I need to be respected, you are sending a green light to everybody to disrespect you, because that's the one thing you lack for yourself. No, for sure. And people are going to mirror that insecurity that you have within yourself back to you, and it's going to trigger stuff until you're going to see that you need to fix it within yourself. Okay, well then why don't we start going more into that, like what is a healthy masculine energy? Because okay, first of all, there's nothing really good and there's nothing really bad. Do you agree with this?
And
they're directed towards things. Evil and good are real forces.
Yes, but for a specific person, I'm not trying to say that this is the best way to do this or this is a bad way to do this. It's more like, what do you actually want out of life? And
let's see what it is and accept it, and then let's take it forward from there.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So these are all just mere suggestions, you know, and it's based off of a perspective of what I would consider a healthy relationship, and same with you. Correct. Okay. So now that we've established that, why don't we look into how each person has both masculine and feminine energies? Would you agree? Yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Now these could be both, like we could have like different sections be immature or mature or toxic. And I would like to hear from you, what would you consider to be a mature masculine man versus an immature masculine man? Because I think we already know what the toxic level of masculinity is, and it's what you see on the internet, you know, the red pill guys that you're talking about. And we're going to do that same thing for femininity.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's great. Let's attack both the sexes. Then it's not a problem.
Right.
Okay, well, we were talking about inherently what does a deterioration of masculinity look like, and what does a deterioration of femininity look like, and also what are the levels from mature to juvenile for both parties. Well, of course, on the highest level is inherently a man that's connected to beast, child, and then spirit. And the accumulation of those things means that he has all dimensions of himself as a man connected to that, right? And of course, there's a certain point where inherently men, of course, the classic motif about masculinity is the ability to protect and provide, but under what outlets are men doing this? And at what point do men feel like men? As often, a lot of men are afraid to walk away in the face of beauty. So inherently, women really challenge men. They really do. And in fact, scare them a majority of the time. So inherently, you have to do one of two things. Either dress up as a man, but inherently you're a boy, right? And then that creates a lot of the toxicity, which is inherently you embody all the symbols of it, or you have all the power or all the things that look like it, but you're not it. Because it's the difference between a pony or a horse. There's a pretty big difference. And unfortunately, it could be fooling a lot of people, especially in a reality where a lot of people aren't connected to it. And I believe that when a man is truly connected to his masculine, he is connected to his values without an expectation from the world.
And wouldn't that even be considered also being connected to the man's feminine side?
Well, that's also connected to the man's feminine side, which is inherently embodied in its chaos, right? So there's a few things for men, if you really want to see if they're willing to take upon the masculine mantle. Fatherhood, husbandhood, and brotherhood. There's a lot that goes into those archetypes because there's so much responsibility in each and every ballpark. Now, how do you make a boy? Tell him you're going to utilize all of the things that you have that are powerful, because as a man, you will come in touch with this power and you'll go on an ego trip for the first couple of years of your life until life checks you. So when you accept responsibility of building, protecting, and providing for those values in your life, then you start to investigate the dark side of yourself that would totally abandon those values in the name of being a man. That's when things start to get a little deteriorated.
For sure.
So how many young men right now are being raised inherently to be fathers or husbands?
None, like almost none.
Zero, right? Now we think about the old archetype of masculinity and what it was and how women responded to them like this. Well, they also didn't really have as many choices, but on a overarching, like what we see in the data is that women responded to men significantly better, and men look up to those men now, right? And women respond to those men now too. So there's a connection to values that the masculine has to enforce in the world. And that's for the masculine. And then now the same thing for the women. There's a connection to values that women have to have that they need to bring into the world as a woman.
In a way, I do believe that the reason why women have kind of picked up the slack of the masculine is because the men have not been able to provide the safety needed for the feminine to then bring about those values. Would you agree with that? So in a way,
it's a two-part game, right? Men abandon their values, which is what has happened. How have men abandoned their values? Through an eradication of responsibility. So there's a few things that can do that. Inherently remove fatherhood. The invention of the birth control did that. And you could see testosterone has dropped ever since then.
Oh, do you want to go into why that is?
Well, why that is? Well, I think it's completely and totally associated to the fact that around the 1950s, when the birth control was initially issued, that's actually when you start to see testosterone start to drop off. I know they say it's a lot of things around plastic and food, but Or if we're talking purely hormonally, I don't think you would have that significant of a shift.
No, for sure.
Because there's an association to irresponsibility and a lack of masculinity. So masculinity comes in the form of responsibility on all fronts.
Yeah.
So although it may feel like an exhausting process, you're a little boy, you look at all the things that you have to do as a man. What do most men do now is they go, well, how can I fake it?
Yeah. No, for sure.
Because that's a lot easier to do.
That creates a split within
that does create a split. It does create a split within the psyche, and you typically tend to hide the dark nature of masculine attributes, and you tend to shine the, so to speak, the flamboyant aspects of it, the things that attract the women, the things that attract the power, the things that attract the success.
Yeah, but then you have a very insecure individual with a lot of repressed fears.
Well, repressed fears, repressed dark side, repressed aggression.
Yes.
It gets dangerous.
It gets
really dangerous. And then you got domestic abuse waiting for you after you get that ring on your finger.
Exactly.
And a whole list of expectations that aren't even communicated.
So that is basically, I guess we covered what toxic masculinity
Well, I did go off on a little ramble there, but the fundamental concept of love is acceptance. And acceptance is harsh because you'll see the ugly.
Yes.
So what I asked you was, what part of you really loves to have a really harsh mirror in your partner? What value do you have that allows you to invite that so that you can improve yourself?
Yeah, just basically I got tired of seeing people around me, even in, my family, push down responsibility to the next generation. And I realized I didn't want to be just another person that had a kid because of selfish desires or selfish needs that I wanted to fulfill.
Or an expectation.
Yeah, or expectations of what I could shape the child to be. Just let that responsibility that I didn't, take on gets pushed down to my kid. I think at some point it needs to stop. And that's when actual growth can happen. And that's when we can actually make an impact in what, humanity can be.
Beautiful. Well, so then this is, what you're describing is love.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
but it's a love that I don't think has been fully understood by most of the world.
No, it's not.
No. If anything, love to them is fulfilling your own needs by also manipulating the other person to believe that that's what they want as well. And yeah, I can't take that.
And that's everywhere now.
Yeah.
You don't get any shortage of that. And that's from two people abandoning their values. I think women have abandoned their responsibility behind motherhood and being a wife. And by the way, I'm saying this because it's absolutely crucial. Yeah. Men have abandoned fatherhood and inherently husbandry. Or you could just say motherhood and fatherhood, because in that there's having a partner, right? And to be a true father, you need to be a beast, right? But you also need to relate to the child. And to be a real mother, you need to be fierce. You need to be a fucking son of a bitch, or a wild one, to say the least, because those are your children there. And if you want them to be the rest like everybody else, you better show up for yourself so you don't watch that cycle repeat. So you see, there's an essential responsibility that every human being has when they come into this world. You need to do better for yourself.
You need to
That is the reason why you're here. You're here to do better for yourself.
Exactly.
And women have to do that within that context. And this is something I was speaking about with one of my friends, is that you can create toxicity through an abandonment of values, thinking that it's going to take away from what you can get from the world. We are here to give. We have to connect to that. And we give by giving life back.
Yes.
And providing for our own. Enough of this altruistic shit about, oh yeah, I'm gonna be the cool uncle who's childless and dies a loser, or the aunt that's there for all of her nieces and nephews. It's absurd.
Yeah.
There's clearly a responsibility that's asked from you to challenge yourself, to see what you can bring out of you into the world. And by the way, we change the world through the family. We
do. No, 100%.
And you're virtuous enough to see that.
Like my one and only fear with that, and I think it's something that I would want to bring out to the world to see, but it's the fact that it's becoming increasingly harder to find communities in which my children could be integrated into if there's not enough people that think like I do, and everybody's just going to be a different type of narcissistic, or even like, as you said, energy vampires.
Yeah, no, those are the worst.
Yeah, because it can get very lonely, and I think that also comes from my own experience of feeling very lonely in a place where nobody really wants to look at themselves in the mirror and see their weaknesses. Because what I've realized is that most people are scared to see their weaknesses because they think that that's where it stops. But instead, I would like to challenge people to see their weaknesses so that they can understand that they can stop being weak so that they can become more of who they are supposed to be. And ideally, this podcast would even encourage them to see that they can become who they're supposed to be in a healthy way.
Well, you're describing something exceptionally provoking that would only be required for somebody that has a value around growth. I think that people need values around three things. Yes. It's about being honest, about being vulnerable, and having a desire to grow.
Okay. Mine are similar. Mine is
those are essential.
To be authentic to myself, which is basically being honest and vulnerable at the same time. And then, you need to be committed to growth, not only consciously, but subconsciously. Because that is something that I found within myself. I was subconsciously committed to comfort, but consciously committed to growth. And when that happens, there's always things that your subconscious is putting in your present life so that you will not grow, to stay in your comfort zone, even if that's not where you want to stay.
Something interesting about self-help and self-awareness and all of these things about self-improvement. And I've noticed this is that people utilize this to sabotage their own relationships, opposed to take accountability for the fact that the relationship is a version of them. People also utilize this to not take any accountability over anything else. Because it's like a self-awareness masturbation, right? I'm so self-aware of all of the things that I'm self-aware of. I'm just going to increase the size of the pool, and I'm just going to take longer circles, opposed to creating direction in your swim. So this is why I believe that values are at the heart of people's change. Of a belief in God, a genuine belief in God. You don't believe in it, don't rush it. You're not ready, right? A belief in fatherhood, a belief in motherhood, a belief in masculine, a belief in feminine.
How do you develop that for somebody that might be stuck in the self-help period where you're like, for example, my mother is one of those people.
Oh, she sounds incredible.
I'm sorry for calling you out.
She
loves theories and books, and she can read for ages, but she is, I would say, and from my perspective, like petrified of going out into the real world and learning about what she should be doing, and because of that, she knows all of the things she should be doing, but she never has the opportunity to put them to the test and actually see if that is what she believes in. So what would you recommend for somebody that wants to get out?
Somebody like your mom. It sounds familiar. My guess is she's very traditional.
Yes.
She's very feminine.
Yes.
And I think that along with that comes a fear of expanding the feminine, which is what a lot of women are falling trapped to, right? It's like the biggest fear for a lot of women nowadays is not that they don't want to have children, is that they're afraid they're going to have nothing else to do after they do that. Right? So the big fear comes in a unevolved feminine, right? And it's like, well, look, we're trying to step into the unknown future as men too. We don't know what that entails, but let's agree to what currently is and what has worked. And let's take conscious, intentional steps forward and expand what we are as men, right? Because if we just hold the old mold, we have the old problems. But if we accept that there was good in the old things, we could take them into the present and then incorporate a level of faith stepping into the new, right? So you actually like described my mom perfectly, which kind of scares me. She's worked on it. She worked with somebody that I recommended to her that I used to work with. And it's called the expansion of femininity, which is inherently through, there's a certain point where you feel like you can't give any more after you've given to the children that you're already around. And there's a certain point where life starts to feel like it's a threat to what you've done. When perhaps
because you put all your eggs in one basket, basically. Right?
It's about coming back to what you know for certain, right? And it's like, well, there's the joy of life. And the beauty of femininity itself and the things that allow you to expand that beauty into your old age. And that comes through, and what I've noticed is inherently a re-softening period inherently, because she's become masculinized in her feminization. So is she really feminine, or is she just protective of what used to work and afraid of what's being demanded? Perhaps you need to date your dad again, right? Perhaps you need to go out in the world. Perhaps you need to go ahead and cook the meals that you used to love to cook. Perhaps you need to be there for your grandkids, right? Perhaps you need to go ahead and investigate the artistic part of you, or perhaps you should go ahead and experience the world, right? And that's threatening, because then you're like, well, I was in the context of the home with my partner and with children, and now that changed. So now it's almost about becoming extra girly again. And I would love to see that for her, because well, I know a person, she can help her out. I'm not joking.
Because I do, like when you asked me if my mom was very feminine, like I did say yes, but there is a part of her that is very masculine within that feminine, and it's what you described
rigidity.
It as. It's rigidity.
It's rigidity.
Yeah.
It becomes callous to new experiences. You say, hey, let's go out to dinner, or hey, we're going to go to this place in Mexico. Would love you to come with, or let's go to the beach. And instead it becomes protective in the name of femininity, right? So it becomes protective, or you could identify that, right? The guy who's super masculine but can't go ahead and put on the Disney Mickey Mouse suit for his kid's birthday is not connected to his masculine. He's protective, and then there's an expression of not too cool to laugh and brave enough to cry. And there's a particular point where, as men, if we don't connect with our humanity, we become something that cannot satisfy women.
Yeah, because you're a psychopath by then.
Exactly. You're either this like mold of a dude who wears aviators inside with a turtleneck and a nice watch, which I saw at Mastro's the other day, so it's fresh in my head. I felt sorry for him. Or you become something free. You're not abandoning masculinity, because masculinity is through the connection of the values, not through the leather you wear, right? And it's like,
well, would you even say that guy or the type of person that we're describing has all developed their masculine, and sure, it could even be in a healthy way, but is out of touch with their feminine energy that you do have within any human, or no?
So the way an integrated masculine looks is the ability to give space to a woman. He doesn't stay there. He interacts with it. I function within my masculine, right? And that's a very healthy thing. For a person that's more in touch with their more feminine energy, so to speak, is inherently more in touch with the emotional capacity that he has, that he could fuel himself with. And this is a very cool story, well, not a story, more of like an anecdote about alpha male chimpanzees. That most of the time people think the alpha male chimpanzee is the most powerful and the strongest. He's not the strongest and not the most powerful. He is stronger. He is twice the strength of the average one. And he has 3 times the empathy of the matriarchal chimp of the tribe.
Oh, wow.
So he's inherently the most emotional, yet also the best leader. So there's something about an integrated man has the ability to empathize with people, to feel for his people, but has the courage and the strength to rule them, so to speak, to lead them.
That, I think those type of men, the ones that are very masculine, but yet have that feminine aspect integrated into them, or should I not call it feminine energy integrated back into them?
You could, but some people will probably run with it and do what they like with it, but this is the best way to describe it. So
because if a man is in touch with his emotions and is also acceptant that you don't always have to be doing things, you could just also be, but you do provide and you do fulfill your responsibility, then that shows me that they have integrated their feminine energy in a very healthy way, and they're, the embodiment of both masculine and feminine.
But it's so relative. When women go, I'm in my masculine right now, your masculine proportionate to your feminine as a woman is like a house planted in a forest with a level of it being groomed, and the rest of it is thousands of miles of forest. The yin and yang analogy is the best way to describe it, is that there's feminine in the masculine and there's masculine in the feminine, but there's a certain point where people start to utilize that as protection, which eliminates their ability to attract a partner. When you commit to your role as a king, there's inevitably a queen. But if I live my life as a king with an expectation who goes, oh, I don't have my queen, I can't rule the kingdom, you're not much of a king. And the same thing goes for a queen or a woman in her life. If you're like, oh, where's my husband? I need somebody to make me feel safe. You're a drag, right? And so it's very important that when you integrate this, you find the security within you and you embody what you are. And then now you exist with balance and polarity, opposed to, I deep down want somebody to crack down all of these walls and be my therapist and my coach and save my ass, right? Which is what a lot of women who've masculinized, and then they go out in the world and they get more and more upset because all they attract is feminine men. Or men that have a masculine front and feed back your projection about what you think they are. And then you're like, whoa, holy shit, I'm wiping this guy's ass 6 months down the line. Like he wants a strap on halfway through, which is becoming more and more common. Silly shit. But there's inherently a masking of the masculine nature, which is causing it to come out in the relationship, which is hurting the ability to be loved, because we don't have that many tries. It's an absurdity that we do. You lose neuroplasticity every time you have a high and then a low and then an absolute devastation. Your likelihood to do that again decreases. For a man, by about 10% every time. For a woman, I'd say probably about by 100.
Wow.
That's how much of an effect it has.
That's ridiculous.
Which is inherently why it's so damn important to understand that you need to protect this space, and that this is done within the context of masculine and feminine together. We need tribe more than ever. You need a man in your corner before you even marry your guy. And I need a woman in my corner before I even marry my girl. So there's something very interesting about that. Not saying, okay, have your friends, because that's not the point, but have a family. Because that is the people that are going to look out for you the most. And the family congregates on a collective set of values that everybody agrees on. And those values are going to be what's going to be determining the relational success. That you guys can both establish what those are, and that the vision is identical. And then the struggle is essential. It's just part of what gets you guys closer to each other. And then when that happens, is you understand that you're upholding the feminine frame, I'm upholding the masculine frame. And then there will be points in the relationship to where you reach. Reaching is when he's had a long day at work and he wants to be burped like a kid, right? And sometimes where you're sick as fuck and he'll start cooking up and wiping some kids' diapers, right?
And I think that is healthy.
But the second an expectation got slapped on that, kindness is eradicated. So it's very important to understand that there will be kindness and there will be flexibility along the way. But a lot of people, opposed to doing the internal work, will immediately establish, well, flexibility is good. Let's be Mr. Gumby. No, there's a reason why this works. It's because people are agreeing to show up for what they have to do in the relationship. And they could do that best for themselves and for you.
What I've noticed in a lot of women in my life has been that after having a very negative experience with a masculine man, or even a masculine man that was destroyed on the inside and was actually just didn't have anything with himself, is that then they go and attract or even only feel safe with men that are very much in their feminine energy. And that looks like, having like high emotional intelligence and being vulnerable, and it's the men that cry constantly, but they still are always looking for a partner that is more masculine. So even if they try to convince themselves that this is safe, and it's where they stay, they have that longing for an actual masculine partner.
Well, that's dark nature right there. Well, and so there's something very scary. If you're very masculine and you're with a very feminine woman and you get hurt in that relationship, your likelihood to demonize femininity will increase significantly. If you're very feminine and you gravitate towards a very masculine man and you watch the dark side of masculinity, you will demonize that and then go to a safe bet. And if you go to a safe bet, you can say goodbye to good sex. That's on number one.
No, I completely agree with that because of the polarity.
Yeah, you're going to lose and lack that feeling of respect for him. Women only respect men. They don't respect it things. If you can control him, your vagina won't work.
Well, I mean, it will work, but there will be no passion.
Okay, well, it won't work.
Just say that.
So I'm coming in the place for just to animate it in the most honest, vulnerable way possible, which is through the context of sex. You can really see how it affects the relationship. Very masculine man, very feminine woman. She feels safe and reassured around him. How do you know he's really masculine? He scares the fuck out of you. How do you know he's not going to hurt you? He has a system of values that he upholds, and you see his behavior.
So this goes back to a man that is able to hurt you deeply,
the man that's able to hurt you,
not to, and that is what makes him inherently powerful.
And that's also what makes him respectable. So the man that can hurt you and chooses to protect you is the man that is truly capable to defend you from the other men, because he is that capable.
Yes, and this even goes back to morality. If you're able to do something but you choose not to, is what actually makes you moral, as opposed to if you are unable to do something and that is why you don't do it, then does that really make you moral? You're just weak. Exactly.
Truly being virtuous implies that you have options. It also implies that you can hurt others, and it also implies that you are selfish. So before you go about and say, well, I would have treated you like a queen, maybe you have nothing to do all day, right?
Maybe you can't even do that.
Maybe you can't even do that. And women see that. They see it really well. But there's something exceptionally scary about a proper relationship, is that it will challenge you. And that it will scare you, and that you will feel fear. And then the most important question to ask yourself is, where do I go when I'm afraid? Do I run? Do I come close? Do I criticize? Do I attack? Do I protect myself? And the beauty of a vulnerable relationship is where you guys can both understand this about each other. And the implication is not I'm walking out. It's I'm trying to get closer to you. Help me, and I'll help you.
And that is only done through creating a safe space within the dynamic of being able to show your weaknesses without them being used against you. And that that is something that I don't think most people know what it feels like, because even in their childhood, their weaknesses were used against them, either by their parents or by their peers. And unless that is healed through a relationship, they will never really be able to experience that. What do you do there? You know, like what would be the correct step to go towards becoming the person that could even provide safety? Because I don't think you're able to provide safety for another person if you're not able to provide safety for your own self.
Well, that's the whole thing, right? That's what women look at. They look at capacity, and then they look at your ability to do that for yourself and for others in your life. And then they can put themselves in that equation. But a lot of women have this feeling of inferiority, that they feel like every guy is a project piece and they need to build them up to that. That was something he was supposed to do for himself.
Yes.
Anything that you see of him is not real. Anything that you see of him now is. Now, you can help build him towards that if that's what he established for himself.
Yes.
Then it's no longer you telling him what to do. It's you inspiring him to be better, because that's what he signed himself to do.
Exactly.
So there is something interesting, and it's in regards to like, what does a vulnerable relationship look like so that people can start interacting with each other? And I noticed it's often through when neither party is attached to power. Insecurities in general typically gravitate around a need to feel a certain way. Which is, I can only be open with you if you are lower than me, which makes men go for women they don't respect. It makes women go for men they don't respect.
And essentially it's all about control.
And it's all about control. And control is an aspect of fear. And actually a non-vulnerable reaction, when the most vulnerable reaction is to go, oh, you're going to see me differently here.
Yeah, and like, that's okay.
And I've had that before. It's like, something absolutely changed my life is this girl that I was seeing relatively recently, probably something that allowed me to let go of a lot of things I was holding on to. And it's that I recognized how the game only happens, not because two people don't want to be with each other, but because two people both need to feel power, and either one loses and one wins, because that's the implication of a game. What if it's not about that at all? What if it's about play? What if it's about incorporating each other and bringing out the best in one another? And that there is no win or loss. It is about growing together throughout the playing process of, ooh, you got me, oh, I got you, but we're here to see each other. And so the most interesting thing was inherently how I remember just seeing how I was perceived was held above the relationship.
Yeah, because that is very important.
And the same thing was for her. And I recognized that I was being vulnerable with her, but I recognized she wasn't being vulnerable with me. Until, of course, there was a certain point we kept bumping into each other, just because that's how the universe works. Like, even if you don't text each other, you'll bump into each other. And it would always be her going, yeah, what's up? Cool to see you. And it's like, well, we slept with each other like 24 hours ago. You don't want to talk about any of that stuff, right? And because that's things that you should talk about. That implies a lot of vulnerability. Like, a lot of men even now are performative, and a lot of women are performative. And it's like, my intuition told me something. This woman is head over heels for me, and she's overwhelmingly feminine and needs constant reassurance and constant attention. What did she mask herself with? I'm a boss ass bitch. I don't need constant attention. Of course, now we sit down and have the vulnerable conversation. The waterworks start to happen on her, because now exactly we're talking about the real issue. And that's when I recognized that when she was able to let go of how she was perceived, because what was she doing with me? She was casting a projection about who I was. So when you are focusing on how you are being perceived by others, you are also putting projections on other people. 100%. Eliminating your ability to find love. And so when I recognized this and I said, something is telling me, because I sat down and I listened, it's a very powerful trick for men, it'll make you irresistible. When you have a problem, just sit down and listen. Let them go for an hour, don't say a word. Then everything that you need to know will already have been said. Once it starts to go in a circle, you can stop and start interjecting. But once you got everything that you need to know, you've listened to everything that they're trying to talk about. It's the emotion you're going for here, not just the things that they said. And then I ended up confronting her on that, which is when we were with each other intimately, and then the next day you went to the club with your friends, that was insensitive. Where's your accountability? None. And then that's when you can't have a relationship. It's when people aren't willing to go, you know what, you're right, I did do that. That's fucked up. That's really fucked up. Why did I do that? Past relationship. Am I going to justify with it? No. I'm going to take full accountability for the fact that there is dark nature in me and would rather feel powerful than be loved.
And was she able to come to that conclusion?
Yeah, she was able to come to that conclusion. But it was after 3.5 hours of having a conversation about it. And that's typically when the relationship's over. Because she had to want it.
But she learned.
She did learn. And that's what's beautiful. Is that a healthy relationship is one that makes you a better person for it.
No, 100%.
Genuinely a better person.
Well, then that is the advice towards, masculine men. So let's going back to what we had talked about in, for example, women that are now in a relationship with overly feminine men. because they had hurt by the masculine. Is that even salvageable? If like the man is stuck in the feminine, is there a way without there to be a rupture in the relationship, without there being a rupture in the relationship, for the man to kind of step up and become more masculine? And if so, what would be the steps that he would need to be taking within the relationship?
So there's absolutely a way for men to step up to the plate, but they have to want to do that themselves. But then why would they pick a woman that's more masculine? Typically going to take more charge in the relationship. And it's going to change inherently the polarity, which is very powerful for attraction, which is dependent on relational success. I wouldn't expect it.
You wouldn't expect for the man to kind of pick
and
up.
I also wouldn't expect for the woman to kind of pick it up. They have to make these conclusions for themselves. Because truth be told, if you stop doing things prior to engaging in any relationship, you will destroy all imposters in the relationship. And I believe that that's where these things start. When you start really focusing on how can I be the best partner? That's it. I'm going to write a whole list down of how I can be the best partner. And I'm going to fall in love with that process. You will invite the partner that will also be doing the same thing, asking how they can be a better partner. And from themselves. And then at that point, you have people voluntarily taking the mantle, opposed to, and by the way, here's what might happen. You take the whole feminine, the ultra masculine woman and the feminine man, and then he steps into his masculine. And then she's too afraid to leave him. So opposed to her connecting to the feminine, she does a performative feminine. And then now he gets an agreeable, resentful woman, and he's now subconsciously losing the whole relationship itself, because now when it's time to move things forward, she can't, because she actually is too resentful. And at that point, the water's been poisoned.
And you have to get out.
And so it's actually crazy. I mean, there are people that can pivot in relationships. But most importantly, if you're a man and you're struggling with that position and you're finding how you're constantly being like tyrannized by this like overall masculinized crow of sorts, or like, it's the best way to describe it. I mean, this goes for women too, is you have to set a boundary, but you have to connect to that boundary, or else it's going to be tested.
For sure.
And when it's tested, you better connect to it, because I demand respect. You're not getting any respect, right? Versus that kind of behavior is not something I want. In fact, I'm going to leave. Right? I mean, that's kind of an ultimatum, but a better boundary is these are things that I often don't like, and it's been happening again and again, and it constantly makes me feel like I'm invaluable. I'm unvaluable at all, and I'm worthless.
But
what does this mean to you?
But a very feminine man would not be willing to leave, even if they're being constantly disrespected.
And there's a certain point it leads into, unfortunately, some people being cucks and passing their chick off, or just saying you could have as many male friends as you want because I can't provide you that space and you don't respect me, but I'll take the boyfriend slot. And then over time she'll find a guy that she finds more desirable than you, and if she's principled enough, she'll divorce you or break up with you. But if she isn't,
how do you salvage the relationship once something like that has happened and you still want a future with that person, whether being the man or the woman in that? In a way, it is like, we have an overly masculine woman that had to kind of step into the plate of being masculine because,
I usually think
the man was very feminine.
So I think you set a stage for an absolutely powerful conclusion and a very powerful question. There's a certain point where eventually so much of the psycho jargon, and what I like to call psychobabble, becomes circular and narcissistic in its thinking, because the paradigm is around I and me. Right? It's not about us. Because if it was about us, then it's about what we bring. And you said something really beautiful, which is, I'm done to see the cycle repeat in my children. Isn't that the responsibility we all have as men and women? Right?
Truly.
So what it made me realize is I want to stop this emotional psychobabble, is the best way. This narcissistic, emotional narcissism is the best way to put it. Where people are looking about themselves and they're starting to find as many things about them that make them feel like they are more powerful. When the whole purpose of a relationship itself is around family.
For sure.
And if it's not, then it's pretty much about how I can pick the craziest person that can just bring out the most about me that I can find out. And then at some point you're going to break, because the relationship is not about contributing. It's about who could withstand, who's a stronger force of metal, and who breaks first.
But then you'll be alone.
Well, then you'll be alone. And that's exactly the interesting thing about the emotional narcissist. What's his biggest fear? Loneliness. And how do you create it? Through swimming in that same circle pool, thinking you're going to find a different answer. Because it's not about you, it's about something more. And I've noticed this even with my clients and men that are working on masculinity in general. A lot of them connect to childhood and fatherhood because they don't want to accept the implications of their sexual beast. A man
Say more about that.
it's very fascinating that and this goes for women too. So they're like, oh, this would solve a lot of questions if I just got married and I just had kids. And for men, this would solve a lot of my problems if I just got married and just got kids. But what is the current unideal situation showing you about yourself? Let's say that never happened. What would you do? Right? And so there's a part of you that you need to discover so that you can be the ultimate mother and the ultimate father. Because women that do not address the repressed sexual sides will express it in the outside of their relationship. Men that do not address their repressed sexual side will come out in dirty ways, either in prostitution, pornography, or promiscuity. And that goes in both parties. And so, or particularly for men. For women, it's just going to be, you have options. So just say, hey, you want to run this? And they'll run it, typically. So what I noticed is often there's a particular aspect for both men and women that they have to, if they want love, it doesn't stumble on your front door. You got to dive deep within yourself and see what that implies about you. Because there's so much to the human mind. There's so much to the human spirit. And if love is the ideal, and you're here right now, why do you think you're ready? You're maybe not. That's a great place to start. Because the day that you are ready, you'll know you are, because you haven't been lying to yourself for 20 plus years. And you've just attached your worth to that word ready, opposed to showing up for the journey. And showing up for the journey means you're worthy. So the best way to describe inherently the massive split that's going on is that often a lot of people are comforted by the relationship when they have not discovered that the relationship is to serve a function. It's not something to make you feel comfortable. It's actually going to make you uncomfortable, and it's there to serve a higher purpose.
Which also comes from being all together.
It does come from being all together. But look, I've had enough of the birth rate dropping. I've had enough people getting on birth control pills, telling that to women that that's a healthy thing for them. It's absolutely not. Don't even need to bring up any of the science for it.
No, I completely agree.
And you don't need to think that it's healthy for men in relationships to be watching porn. I had enough with this promiscuous society and that people mindlessly hook up with each other, interacting with psychopathy, thinking that it's not and it's fun. I think it's
all of these
dangerous.
Things that you're actually describing is all about, part of the hedonistic practices, which basically is, I am the center of the universe and everything should be about what makes me feel good. And I think that's an aspect of human nature, isn't it? It really is.
It needs to be integrated into an ideal for the ideal to exist at all, because that is our dark side.
Yeah, that is the dark side.
You described it perfectly.
But you definitely need to be able to master it so it doesn't master you instead. Like, you don't want that to be the master of who you want to be.
Well, then this is where I like to make things, religious, but let's just focus on the fact that there are a system of values we uphold ourselves to. We're left down to a choice. Because if you think that a part of you is just going to magically find peace with that part of you without there being a reason, what is the reason?
What is the reason?
What is the reason? And that's a very powerful drive to get you to become an integrated man. And all integrated men meet integrated women. And integrated men and women can find love. Because if there's integration, it means that there's two parts. And if there's two parts within them, they can choose you.
And wait, how does religion...
Well, the religion inherently ties into this. Well, I'm not saying religion as a whole, but I'm saying a religious system of beliefs, something that you believe in, a value, something transcending your reality. It's something outside, it's existential, it implies purpose and meaning. That's what's at the heart of this decision, because you don't have to make this decision. This decision will challenge you and change you. Now ask yourself a question. Why does it matter? Why do I even need to ask myself these questions? Why do I even want a healthy relationship? Am I watching this because it makes me feel good about myself? Am I watching this because I just want to be in love and I feel like shit all the time? Or am I watching this because I'm asking myself a much deeper question? What does this whole life mean? And what is it asking from me? And is there a force out there that I need to come connect and develop a connection to so that I can actually start implementing goodness in the world? Because goodness is not something that you just take a shit and go, oh, wow, I found it. No, it's something you dedicate your life to finding. For sure. So I honestly noticed this. Bullshitters in anything in life are not the thing that drive love forward. They're the people that look to take from it.
For sure.
That will be in anything. There will be the people that do not care and will decide to take what they want out of anything. And then there will be the people that care. And I noticed that the people that care are often the ones that care the most about others because they discovered the most about themselves and they understand the harsh implications of this whole process. And so what it's really about is opening up to so much more than just you getting a relationship, but why you're even here to begin with.
No, for sure. And it's also because you've found that you have something to give And I don't think most people feel that way.
It's a moral obligation to do so. And you got to find connection to giving itself, because that's what we're here to do.
All right. Well, that kind of wraps it up. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to be in this podcast.
Thank you so much. I had such a wonderful time.
Yeah, no, there might be a part 2. Just a heads up.
There might be a part 2. I'm excited.
All right. Bye. Thank you, Naftali.